I'd like to call the regular board meeting of the Ross Valley Sanitary District to order. Roll call, please.
Thank you. Borstein,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Megs,
Yes. We're
Scylla,
here.
Gaffney.
Present.
Thank you.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Item 2 is approval of agenda. I think we can keep the agenda the way it is, unless somebody, no, I don't see anything.
I'll move the agenda.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Yes, thank you. Borstein,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Megs,
Yes.
Scylla,
Yes.
Gaffney.
Yes.
Unanimous vote. Thank you.
Now is open time for public to raise items not on the agenda or for future agendas. Anybody wishing to address the board of directors on matters within the jurisdiction but not on the posted agenda may do so. Any public
I
comment?
think Bob LaBelle's on. I thought I saw him.
Is there any, Julia, do we know?
I believe a couple members of the public are here, but you are welcome to unmute yourselves if you would like to make a public comment at this time.
Okay, hearing none, let's move on. Committee reports out, CASA Winter Conference. 3 of us attended the winter conference, 4 of us actually.
4 of us.
And any comments from, what did we learn there? I think.
I'll start. Before the conference, it was suggested that Aaron Brockovich was going to do a talk about PFAS and as the keynote speaker. And I think everybody's first thought was cool, Julia Roberts, but neither Julia or Aaron were there because Aaron said that she
Double booked herself for a few other items. And we had a fellow named, she sent a little video and that was lovely. But they had a guy named Bob Bocock came instead, and he was pretty awesome. Everybody agreed that his presentation was amazing. For some reason, which I haven't been able to figure out, and I talked to Cheryl at CASA, and I know they filmed it, and I know they recorded it because it was all there, and there were people doing that, but that's not available. So Julia has put out to everybody the PowerPoint presentation that Mr. Bocock provided us. And it was just really interesting to hear like that the EPA has only banned 6 of the PFAS compounds. And I believe the numbers he said there are 11,000 known PFAS compounds. And so they're working very hard to figure out how they're going to deal with all of those. And there was also some suggestion that it's not completely unattainable to begin to eliminate the PFAS compounds. Turns out there are PFAS compounds in damn near everything. Scotch Guard, nail polish lipstick, Anything that makes things float off better. Car wax.
Yeah, anything for outdoors wear. Patagonia, my wonderful Patagonia jackets that I love. But they're filled with PFAS, and every time you do the wash, it comes out. It goes into the wastewater, and it's going into the oceans. He made a point that really no problem for me because I'm a vegetarian, but he suggested that people should not eat freshwater fish anymore because freshwater is filled with PFAS as opposed to seawater, where at least it's perhaps a little bit more dilute. Anyway, it was a very good conference. I was pleased to be there, other than I know that I came back with a nice little case of COVID. It's very, very mild, thank goodness. But I think everybody was happy to be there. Oh,
I have a few comments. I didn't get COVID, but I know Jean Mariani came down with 2 people that had COVID. So,
really?
so I guess it's hit or miss there. The title of the conference was Navigating Uncharted Waters, which is really true considering all what's going on out there. But as Michael said, the PFAS was the most interesting and intriguing and scary. Judy Schreibman, my buddy, she always called it forever chemicals. And she explained to me, you cannot get rid of them. And so right now, just so you know, is like they're even in artificial turf. So, but I don't want to go on the sideline of that. But anyway, I went to the PFAS and microplastics, the drought, water reuse, and water recycling. These are called roundtables, and they're big roundtables in a big room. So people from all over the state, and it's really interesting. You get to meet and connect with everybody and all different, not only wastewater, but drinking water, et cetera. And then I went to the energy resiliency roundtable. And it's really interesting talking about like small districts as ours about how to take care of yourself. So in emergencies, et cetera. So the new word was kind of here and there a lot was the word resilience, and information on what do we do for, we're a small scale power generation, but how will we be able to integrate battery, solar energy in all these different venues to help us out through especially emergencies. And we also talked about, they're up to 130 now, agency and 80 associate members. And the conference at Lake Tahoe, by the way, had 250 people attend. They also have 30 scholarships they've awarded with the amount of $266,000 overall. So they're quite a distinct and growing agency. I feel really proud to be able to go. I just want better food. But no, it was great. Great time. Thank you.
You're on mute, Tom.
Doug, thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to add to that, and thanks for reminding me, Pam. CMSA, at my request, donated $1,500 to that scholarship fund. I'd like to put that on an agenda item at some point, or just let the general manager make a decision on his own.
Okay, that's a great idea because I agree. I had 2 things that impressed me. I did the roundtables and I did the funding opportunities, and there were some ideas there. And then I did the new collection system requirements, the WDR update. And Paul Causey led that, and he gave a really good summary of, I think it's 127 pages of, what the final document is coming out. And he gave a real good plug for our manager, Steve, who really helped them in the very final hour. I think Steve could tell us about it more, but I think the meeting up at the state board started in the morning and lasted till about 7 o'clock. And at that meeting kind of turned the board around. They kind of went against some of the recommendations of their staff, and it was in much, to a large extent, due to Steve's efforts. So anyway, and Paul was effusive about that. So thank you, Steve, too. But I thought the CASA is one of the top organizations. It's so well run, and we have really good representation at the state on legislative matters and at the federal government. And it's extremely important for us because they can come up with some bizarre regulations that attorneys can dream up and not understand the unforeseen consequences. So I'm agreeing with our other board members. It's a really valuable tool for us to use. Any other comments on CASA?
I just say that both Tom and I attended the CSRMA on Wednesday morning, and that was a different CSRMA than I had ever seen in the last 8 years of doing a CSRMA. They had a guy, what was his name? Dick Harris?
Mitchell, David Mitchell.
David Mitchell. And he was like for 25 years, the head HR person for recruiting and retention at Disney World in Florida. And he's retired from there, and he's written many books now. And he gave us all a test. There was like 24 questions, answer them real quick. I'll just give you one very quick example. Here are 4 statements, and you need to say A, B, C, or D. Which one's the most important, second important, third? So your favorite restaurant or vacation, which is most important to you? Your favorite restaurant or vacation spot, family or friends, a new place or situation, and a competitive and or learning situation. And anyway, he went through and figured it all and cross-tabbed. And then he went around the room and everybody had to say, there were 4 categories of people. The romantic, the warrior, the expert, and I'll be damned if I can remember the other one, Tom.
The romantic, the expert, the warrior. I wrote them down, but I can't find it.
But anyway, it was very interesting because I think it was it would be interesting for Steve and Felicia maybe sometime to do it for fun, and also just to think about doing it for the staff and see where everybody comes out. And on the backside, you can sort of see what kind of personalities people have and why somebody would work together and not work together. And anyway, it was interesting. I turned out to be the romantic.
4th category was the masterminds.
That's right.
That's what I was.
Jason was also the romantic. Tom was the expert, I think.
I know I was the mastermind.
You were the mastermind.
It means I bounce around a lot is what it meant. You know.
And then the very last piece of it, he went around and he spent like the last 40 minutes bringing up Hollywood movies. So he said, you know, if you're a romantic, this is the Hollywood actors who represent romantic.
Can you name one for the romantics?
I can't. I'm sorry.
The masterminds that were Kirk, you know, on Star Trek, Marlon Brando and Harrison Ford. I think that was pretty cool. Okay, so actually, it was a fabulous HR presentation, and
It was.
as you'd expect. Okay, that took a while. Finance Committee. Oh, by the way, I came back with COVID too from CASA.
Oh, sorry.
Committee. Oh, I'm testing negative now, and I didn't get it bad either. Finance Committee report. Mary?
We had a relatively brief meeting. We reviewed the financials, which are looking so beautiful and reading like a narrative document so that even I can understand it. And we looked at the approval of the disposal of the surplus equipment, which is item 7D.
Yeah, and staff is going to go over the monthly financials because they're so good and there's so much information in them. We thought we ought to go over them in more detail. CMSA, who's going to tell us about that?
Me, either way.
You start out, Doug.
Okay, I just got to pull my front page off because I've got it there. Okay, so we got some awards. 2022 California Water Environmental Association Awards, Redwood Empire. We got 5 awards, including one that was for the entire agency, and that was the Engineering and Research Achievement Awards for putting the 2 new digesters, getting the power, the new generator cogen going, and producing energy with Marin Clean Energy or with PG&E. So we got that award, which was really good. We put together a professional services agreement for centrifuge dewatering improvement project. Our centrifuge is 20 years old. We actually have 3 of them. We're hoping to possibly only need 2, 1 and a backup, and actually getting some money for the old ones, which is interesting. We did a draft 5-year revenue plan, which is important. Everybody should know. It's a simple statement of that in fiscal 24, we're going to increase costs 4%, 4% in 25, and 3.5% in 26, 27, and 28. So that's 4, 4, 3, 5, 3, 5, 3, 5. So this district obviously will have to take that into consideration when we're looking at our budgets coming up. We did accept completion of the cogen system installation. So that's done. And it came with some really nice pictures of all the equipment. So people should, if you're interested, take a look at the agenda. Let me see if I can, the first picture there.
We all get the agenda, right?
Yeah.
I get the agenda.
Okay, the Jen Bacher, well, you're on the finance committee. That's why you get it. The Jen Bacher engine is looking really nice. It's Kelly Green, so that's lovely. And we did authorize to bid out the secondary clarifier number 2 rehabilitation project. We have 4 clarifiers. We've rehabilitated 3 of them, so this will be the last one. And that was about it. I did make a point of thanking CMSA for allowing Ross Valley Sanitary District to hold their in-person meetings there until 11/11 is ready.
Very good. You're muted, Mike.
There was an interesting discussion last night about the centrifuge dewatering systems, because it's different than any project which I've seen in the over 8 years in any of the boards, which is we're going into a project where we really don't know what the outcome is. We don't know what kind of centrifuge we're getting. So we don't know the whole scope of the project. It may be less, it may be more. And before we can even do a project design, Black & Veatch, who we've chosen, needs to come in, and there's a bunch of different companies that do centrifuge dewatering systems, and what they will all do, because everybody's effluent is different, is they will actually come in with a flatbed truck or on pallets, and they will bring one of the centrifuges dewatering systems in, and we and the consultant will hook it up and see how they all behave. And maybe it's the point where they behave so well, like Doug said, instead of needing 3 centrifuges, maybe we only need 2, because instead of doing 50 gallons a minute, they'll do 150 gallons a minute. And the output and the amount of polymers that's used and all of that will be different. So it came out that, at least it seemed like the amount, the cost estimate to do the just the proposals and designs was high at what we estimate to be 30% of the total project cost, which is, as you know, we generally like to keep it under 10%. But the fact is, we don't know what the total amount of the cost is, and there's this extra piece at the beginning that's anyway, it was an interesting discussion, and we ultimately said, Jason, we trust you and keep us appraised of what's going on. And so it'll be interesting to see them bring these in big container trucks and hook them up and watch them go.
And the reason it's 27% actually, and it'll drop because the cost of the cogens is going to be about $1 million too. And so it will reflect appropriately at that time.
Interesting. I'm on the finance committee of CMSA, and the reason we went to, by the way, CMSA is in excellent financial condition. They're going to be able to fund about a $60 million capital program They may need one bond issue in the range of about 13 million. They may do two. It just depends. And but because of the algae blooms in the South Bay, we may have to do I think it's called nitrification.
Nitrification.
Yeah. And
denitrification.
yeah, and it's nitrification, denitrification is the way I've heard it. But
Nutrient removal project is the generic.
yeah, and it could be up, like $30 million hit. And so we, that's the reason we went to 4s. Otherwise, 3.5 would carry the CMSA agency, very well. And 4 probably will generate some extra revenue in anticipation. Okay, how about North Bay, Pamela?
North Bay.
New board
Julia,
president.
can you share the screen or not? Are you able to? With
Yes, I could share my screen.
the PDF I sent you from the.
Sure, just give me one moment.
Great, thank you. So I hope everybody got the PDF from their minutes, from the North Bay minutes. This is called, I'll just start, the Sonoma Water Regional Water Supply Resiliency Study. There you go, the word resilience again. Anyway, it was a fabulous report from Sonoma County Water. It was complicated, but it was incredibly informational and got me to understand more about how big this regional water supplier is, meaning Sonoma. So if you look at the can they see the slide? Because I pulled this off a different.
Not yet.
Okay. Anyway, the first slide shows you a map, and you can see all up and down. Can you forward it, Julia? Please. The first slide.
I'll put one more.
Yep, there you go. So there you have it to start with. How many people receive water from the Sonoma Water Agency? It's pretty large, and the Russian River flows into it, and there's a couple reservoirs. And we are, you go into the slides, we are what's called a retail agent. In other words, we buy water from them. So if you could go to okay, you already did. Thanks. This talks about all the other agencies involved. It's quite extensive. Can you go on to the next one, Julia? I'm going to try and get through this kind of fast because there's a lot of slides. Okay, so if you could stop here. This is an amazing map. You can see all the water agencies, including the lakes. This is where my father took me fishing, was Lake Pillsbury. So I really thought this was very helpful to include each one, and they numbered them. I thought it was well done. And this is how they interconnect. Okay, next slide, please. So here's are the factors that they're looking for the study. They wanted to identify key factors, but the biggest thing that you'll see in the next few slides is the risk factors. If you could go on to the next slide. This is how they're going to phase the study, and it's for the next 2 years. And if you could keep going, because this is the one that really hit me, was this risk driver. And you can see how they played out with wildfire, earthquake, etc. It was very helpful to me to be able to see some of these because I hadn't thought of them at all. Even have COVID in here. And let's see, this talks about how they're integrating, and here's the Russian River and the Sonoma transmission system and the retail customers, which is Marin. Okay, you can go on, please. There's a whole bunch of graphs. So there's some nice drought pictures. And And here are some baselines of the simulations of drought. Steve, I can't remember the two engineers. If you know their names, I think it's at the end of the study. They were fabulous. They were really exceptionally good. Okay, if you could keep going. And here's some stress tests they've been doing with different lakes. If you could keep going. And I think we're almost at the end. If you could go, okay, if you could stop here. So here again is the increased supply, the reduced demand, the improved operations, and then how they are going to modify these systems. Okay. And here's another summary. And they also, I'm sorry, I didn't mention, but throughout this study is groundwater production, or not production, I guess. Okay, next slide. This is a summary again of test. This is how they're stressing. And then here are the shortages. This is right up your alley, Steve, right? Okay, keep going. I think we're at the end. No, there's a lot of graphs. Keep going. At the very end, it's got, here is right here, this is their next projects, is to look at these risks to be evaluated currently. And I guess the Potter Valley, I don't know why it's uncertain. I thought that was all handled and it was going to be, the dam was going to be brought down. I don't know what this uncertainty it means. So that's it. Thank you. There's something.
All right, terrific. Let's move on to agenda item 5, verbal report by general manager.
Well, thank you, President Gaffney, and thanks, Director Meggs, for doing that overview of the Sonoma system. The one thing I would point out on that that jumps out to me is that they're looking at the Castania pump station increasing its capacity, and that's the thing that might affect our water supply reliability out of all that stuff, because that's the system that would send more water from Sonoma system to Marin County. So, but yeah, so we do fit in there because there's about 25% of our water supply in our service areas from the Russian River. Thank you. So I've got 3 brief things, and then we'll keep moving. First, on our headquarters project at 1111 Anderson, there was a site plan that we're developing outside the building, and it's gone through design review. We received some comments, for example, on parking that we can answer. And the next stage is the zoning administrative review, which is not the full-blown public hearing. And so, we're hopeful that this will be a fairly efficient process to get the site plan approved. So that's good news. Then concrete is scheduled to be poured on the first floor to cover up the sewer lateral and plumbing that we've installed there. So things are moving along. I think that's tomorrow, Paul. That's right. Yeah. So we're still making good progress there. Second, we met today, actually, something we're planning for. Since we won the collection system of the year for small systems of the Redwood Empire section CWEA, we've applied for the statewide award, and we've been selected to be a finalist. I don't know how many of there are, but maybe, out of 12 sections or something like that. I don't remember exactly. We're competing, and we're going to have judges visit us on Tuesday, February 28th. So today we organized an approach to a tour of our agency for the judges, and as many as 7 judges are coming. So, and we're setting up a show to highlight the things we believe make our collection system special, as far as all the innovations we do and the way our work gets done around here. And so we'll see how that goes. So it's February 28th. And then finally, my third update, we were in the Marin IJ about our Larkspur Landing property at 2000 Larkspur Landing Circle. Most board members are aware of that. And we're working with the city of Larkspur. Their planning commission directed staff that's working on the housing element of the general plan to work with us to modify the open space section of the property relative to the 2007 map, right? And so we're working to get that information to the city so that they can refine their proposal consistent with the planning commission's direction. So that's all going fine. And that's it for my update this month. Thank you.
Tom, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. Any questions for the board of Steve, or any questions from the public regarding that? I think we have public. Okay, let's move on to item 6, verbal report by board members and requests for future items. Any board member requests? Well, we got one already, and that's to contribute to the scholarship fund, to discuss that in the future. Anybody? Okay, thank you. Public, any suggestions? Hearing none, let's move on to the consent calendar. Matters listed under this item are considered routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless requested by a member of the board or public. Would anybody like to pull something off the Pamela Wood? Which one?
Yes. Can I pull 8C, the flow
Well, we're on
monitoring?
7. We're on 7 now.
You're on
Consent
7.
calendar.
Oh, sorry.
We're going to talk about 8C no matter what. Any staff, did you want to pull off 7B?
President Gaffney, if it pleases the board, we'd be happy to give a presentation on the monthly financials for January 2023. Yes.
Yeah, we'd like that. Anything else? Okay, well, let's hear the presentation on it would be 7B, the monthly financials.
Thank you, President Gaffney and members of the board. I'd actually like to hand the presentation over to our finance supervisor, Corey Spray, and he will be happy to present this item to the board. Corey, go ahead.
All right. Hey, everybody. So we're going to talk about the January 2023 monthly financial report. As part of this presentation, we're going to go through the highlights for the current month. And if you want to stop, or interrupt, or interject at any point along the way, or hold your questions to the end of the presentation, feel free to do so. So without further ado, we're going to get right to it. So January is the 7th month of the fiscal year, so that's about 60% of the way through. So if all of our revenues and expenditures should reflect that, and they do. So if you want to look at board packet page number 11, you can see the revenues. I'll wait for you guys to get there. And look at table 1. You'll see the total revenues for the current month, about $300,000, which case majority of that revenue is all coming from either property taxes or other income. The other income is mainly interest income that's gained from LAIF, our investment account. As for year to date, that's about $22 million, which again is about 60% of our total budget, which overall we're tracking along the way. So any significant items that's been noted from the fiscal year to date, we got our December allocations for our sewer service charges, as well as our property taxes, and which is again by the Marin County two-year plan allocation, and then debt proceeds. So that's what makes the majority of the $22 million for fiscal year to date. Pause there if there's any questions on the revenue. Want to cover anything else? Okay. All right. So moving on. So go to board packet page number 12. We'll start talking about the expenditures now. I'll give a second for you guys to get there. Okay. And we look at table 2. We're going to see the current month expenditures is about $7 million, most of which is related to either CMSA, which is our periodic treatment charges, which is done quarterly. It's per agreement. That's perfectly normal. We have to support our JPA. Our debt service, which is totally normal. The semi-annual payments, that's per our agreed upon indenture agreements with BNY and our bondholders. And then as well as departmental costs related to payroll. So to see the payroll, if you want to look at board packet page number 16, you'll see in each of the departmental line items, the payroll is going to be the largest expense for each one of those. There are some other items that are noted that we would note it as being somewhat significant. That's discussed in the narrative on board packet page 13 and 14. So pause right there if there's any questions on the expenditures. Seeing none, we'll move on.
Thank you, Corey. I just want to point out on those narratives for the board, often questions you may have about the specific numbers in these tables or the graphs. Corey does a fabulous job of keeping up to date to explain in the narrative, where these expenditures are coming from in each department. So there really is a nice, if the number looks funny, you can go back in the narrative and often figure out why. We can explain it there. Thanks, Corey.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Steve, for that. That's the whole purpose of this new format for the report for this new fiscal year and going forward is so that way we can explain, provide to the public and anyone, any interested party, what our finances are. Basically, put a face on the numbers. So moving on to board packet page 18. I'll give a second for you guys to get there. We'll talk about reserves for a second. And as per district internal financial policy, the district is to maintain a set of reserves for internal liquidity purposes. So many of these reserves are discussed within our financial policies themselves, but the most significant ones that we need to point out here are the board committed reserves, which are going to be our operating reserve, our emergency reserve, as well as our capital improvement reserve. These are funded primarily through our operations, our day-to-day operations. And any deficiencies that are recorded within these reserves are to be fully funded by fiscal year end. And as you can see from board packet page number 19, where we have our reserve targets, and you compare that to where our current balances are as of right now on the previous page, which is board packet page 18, you can see that we're pretty much fully funded on all of our reserves, with the exception of the capital improvement, but it's only a minuscule amount, and we're very confident by fiscal year end that won't be fully funded to be in compliance.
Corey, what we've learned on the finance committee is that the committed reserves, we use them. And so, for example, the committed operating reserve is a $10 million, and that's basically as of, I think, like July 1. But by the beginning of December, that is often down to just a few million or some number, because we need it for our dry spell. And the same thing with like our capital improvement reserve, we use it as needed, and it's there because capital projects, they don't come in, they might come, there might be a big expense one month and not more, and so we might dip into our reserve. And so that's about it, right? The restricted ones we don't dip into, but the committed ones we actually use.
That is mostly correct. So like for the committed ones, we do dip into those as needed for our internal operations. For the restricted ones, those are restricted because of legal reasons that's outside of the district. And we only dip into those, or rather not dipping is not really a right word. It's more transactions flow in and out of those. Really, if we're going to pay out outside bondholders.
Okay.
That's pretty much it.
So they're restricted for certain uses, and
Yes.
they can be used.
Yes. But just in terms of a highlight for the current month, there was, as reflected in the revenues and expenditures activity, you'll see that you saw prior, the unassigned balance, or rather the only activity that's recorded within this current month is going to be our normal fund activity, which is our revenue less expenditures, which you see in the unassigned balance of $2.7 million and change moving. or in the operating fund, which is line 5 on board packet page 18, by the way.
Mhm.
And then on line 9 for the capital fund, you'll see that there's in the net result column a movement of minus 3.9 or 3.8 million, which is again just paying for debt service. But that payment of debt service is coming from the restricted net fund balance.
Okay,
So that's how it's all transacting. But net, it's going to be a net zero impact because it's already money, it's already placed there. So the only real impact is going to be, or significant impact is going to be the fund operating fund net result. And to cap it off with our presentation on this, we were, so in prior periods, we've always prepared a check register. If you go to board packet page number 23 and going onward through 45, which includes all of the districts as like cash disbursement activity that is required by state law and any other regulatory bodies. And also just being a good financial steward with wanting to showcase in being transparent. So included in there is all of the check disbursements, including all electronic payments, as well as credit card transactions and payroll related items, especially for our board, so we can always be transparent on who gets paid what and how much. And if there are any questions, happy to take those. Otherwise, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
it's great, Corey. Michael, you're on mute. Mute. No questions. Okay, I don't think we have any. Is there any questions from the public? Hearing none. Thanks, Corey. The Finance Committee goes over that monthly, and it's really changed radically since the current year here with Corey's work. And there's just a lot of good information in there. We appreciate it. So any other consent calendar items? Hearing none, I'd like a motion.
I'll move the consent calendar, please.
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Thank you. Borstein,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Meggs,
Yes.
Scylla,
Yes.
Gaffney,
Yes.
unanimous. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And let's move on to item 8A, monthly operation and maintenance metrics report. Who's going to help us with this one?
Yes, yeah, I'll kick it off and then hand it off to Paul for any highlights he wants to mention. So this is the January O&M report and metrics, and I will point out that we did have some sanitary sewer overflows. We had 3 this month, so we had a no spill month in December, which was remarkable. It took until about January 11th before we finally had a storm related spill, but actually we call it collection system maintenance caused because there was a point repair made many years ago that failed under high pressure of the storm. The volume at the bottom of a hill on a narrow pipe, and we saw this actually a year ago too at a couple sites. So this our corrective action plan on this is to review the point repairs that were conducted in that time period, because there was a question of the quality of the epoxy that was used. So we do have a plan to kind of go back and see if we can prevent similar things, but it was a storm related issue in terms of really abnormally high flows that finally caught up with us on January 11th. And then there were a couple of debris related overflows. And and so it was interesting to see the flow finally catch up too, as far as at CMSA, this much of a compounded rain related impact on our system. On board packet page 56 shows how our total flow to CMSA really came up to over 400 million gallons last month. And when we have the higher flows like that, we do creep up on our percent of influent flow to the treatment plant. And
We
so
were 51% this month.
we're at 49.
I thought the document from yesterday's CMSA was 52. Maybe that was February? No, I mean.
Well, this is for January, and we get their data from CMSA. So yeah, but that's the highest you know, of the year. There's 2 other months this year we've been at 49% of influent flow. So we matched the highest. And that's all of my little highlights. Happy to answer any questions, but I want to give this to Paul too, to point out anything the crew's been working on.
One thing, Steve, if I might make a comment, is we talked with Jason, who was surprised because we've generally been less than San Rafael over some time now, but because of the nature of the storms that came through, the cell nature of them, that there were many times during these storms where the Ross Valley was hit particularly much harder than San Rafael, where we might see 4 inches of rain in the Ross Valley. San Rafael might see 2, and it's gone the other way also. But that, in Jason's mind, that's what probably caused some discrepancies in up and down, is the nature of the storms.
Yeah. And you know, the time of our 3 spills, a total of 2,520 gallons, that was the time when there were a number of spills throughout the Bay Area. Is that the time for that? That was the big storm. And so we read about hundreds of thousands of gallons in other places.
Yeah, that's right. Our spills were dwarfed by other agency spills this time. These were pretty minor, even though there are a couple of thousand gallons. Sounds like a lot, but there were hundreds and hundreds of thousands of gallons spilled at San Mateo, Oraloma, up around Delta Diablo. They had some major issues at their treatment plant. But so there's, yeah, we dodged a bullet a little bit in terms of the heavy storm didn't hit us. We didn't get the eye of the hurricane through Marin, but we got hit wet, you know, we got hit with a successive amount of storms, and Paul can describe this, but you know, we had to make sure we were prepared with, you know, having staff working on the weekends, you know, and we had no problems getting volunteers. Our crews really stepped up to the plate. And that was critical, you know, for us to be out there and ready to respond quickly to things. And we averted a lot of issues by being out there.
Yeah, I agree, Steve. We had staff on 12-hour rotations through the weekend, through storms, through nights. It was effort by all that really proved to make it through those storms. It was quite challenging there for a little bit.
Yeah, I was on the Golden Gate Bridge when an 18-wheeler was blown over. So it was pretty bad.
Okay, any other comments by the board members on the metrics?
No.
Paul, was there anything real briefly you wanted to highlight?
Yeah, if you guys have some time, I wouldn't mind giving you guys a couple highlights.
Sure, we'd like to, yeah.
Yeah, recently the State Water Resources Control Board order in December, I believe Steve has talked to you about it, made some updates to reporting requirements for different spills and emergency response plans. And so in working with that order, the districts met with DFK Solutions Group, who did some of our emergency response plans in the past, and are working to update to meet our June deadline to have all these documents and SOP driven bypass pumping plans and whatnot updated by June. So staff are working really hard to get the information together to get those all built up. The pump station crew has been actively working with CMSA to integrate lift stations 20, 21, 22, 23, 31, 32, and 36 into the new SCADA system that we've been building with CMSA, which really helps staff and on-call staff be able to see real-time data from our pump stations, wet well levels, pump running, And it also helps them determine whether or not they need to report immediately for on-call stuff, or if it can be monitored through your phone and whatnot. So it's a real good tool for our staff members here at the district. It gives us a lot of information and makes me feel, and everybody, I feel a little bit more comfortable about the stations during storms, because we can see what's going on and we don't have to just be reactive. We can sit back and watch. Another big step for us is we worked with MMWD to get 3 new portable water meters. Before we were short some meters, so anytime a crew had to switch a truck or whatnot, they had to disassemble the whole assembly and move it to a new truck, which took 15 to 30 minutes away just for switching a truck. So this now assists staff with being able to get in their truck and properly meter the water that we're utilizing, and saves not only district time, but ensures we're getting more work done out there in the field with flushing and preventative maintenance. And again, as the storms, heavy rains, the repair crew was more of a storm watch due to it's really hard to do patch repairs and repairs in the storms, just to high flows. We responded multiple times to the Diane Lane area in Larkspur, initiated bypass pumping, which really saved us over there and mitigated any spills in that area. Was a really good help. Staff did really good. I was really proud of everybody. For my first season as a wet weather here, it was great to see everybody come together and work really hard. And then CCTV staff have been continuing our lateral enforcement program and inspecting for failing laterals and connections. Through January, they found 11 defective laterals, or tested 11 laterals and found 9 lateral connections in need of repair that were sent out. Overall, we've sent out 30 notice to repairs. We've had 6 complete lateral replacements through that, and we have another 4 in the works right now. And we're also talking with another 3 to do minimal repairs. So we've got at least a third of a return on our notifications, which I feel is really good. And we're always continuing to better our system, but I think it's a good tool in our pocket to assist and let people know. It's not always broken joints. We're notifying people if they have heavy roots and blockages so that they can clear that out and make the appropriate repairs as well without having to do their whole lateral.
Hey, Paul?
Yes, sir.
1 second. I'd love to see if you could add, I love this report, but can you add a third graphic on that? I'd like to see lateral replacements, in the last, since we started the program.
Okay. Yeah, I'll work with Steve and Patrick on that, and we'll see if we can add a section in here for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you can, you always can find that in the
Annual?
The annual,
Yeah.
Which is online.
If there's no other questions, I think that's all for me.
Thank you, Paul. That kind of fits nicely into, as we get into this with our guests here, and thank you for your patience, everyone. The lateral program, a little insight into how we fix laterals.
And I just would like to add that, Paul really has been a great champion of and getting the lateral correction program up and running. So just special thanks to you, Paul, for doing that work, because it was something that we recognized as a need, Steve and I, for the district, and Doug Kelly. I think you mentioned it a number of times over the course of the last few years at board meetings, that this compliance program is an opportunity for us to really make improvements to our system on the private property owners side. And so, yes, thanks again, Paul, for doing that work.
Thank you for all the kind words, Felicia.
Thanks. Any further questions from anybody? Any from the public? Hearing none, let's move on to 8B. Flow monitoring and modeling study, technical memorandum. Steve, are you going to handle this one?
Yeah, I'll introduce it and I'll be then introducing our guests, but I won't go on and on. I want them, they've done some nice preparation and give a PowerPoint that they'll be presenting and that will be available and posted on the website. And so they'll be ready to share screen. Let me just give a real quick overview, the high level. Why do the capacity evaluation? There were a couple of reasons that are described in the staff report, which I hope we had a chance to look at to put this all in context. There was an original capacity evaluation in 2006. It really formed the basis for the sewer system master plan here, which then when the district had the enforcement actions against them, was used to populate the expectations of the enforcement order. And so there were some capacity projects on the list that were expected to be constructed by 2019 under this enforcement order. So that's part of the driver for looking at capacity, because there were, we did get a lot of these capacity projects done. There were 8 explicit projects. There were 3 that were not constructed. And so one of the purposes of doing evaluation at this time, when we were closing out the cease and desist order, you know, we've completed all the pipe repairs that we had to do, and there were these outstanding questions of capital projects. We communicated with the water board in March of 2021, and we said, hey, you know, we've got really everything either done or in construction, but we're not sure these capacity projects are needed. We will do a flow monitoring and modeling study to answer the question if we still need these capacity projects, because we did not see SSOs in these areas that may have been predicted by those old models from, you know, still good models, but from 2006 that modeled the 2006 system. We've done a lot of work in the 3-prong areas, the capital projects, the point repairs, and the lateral replacements and repairs that all contribute to reduction of I&I that reduce the amount of water coming in and causing capacity issues, right? So that was one of the goals, was to, and then these are listed in my staff report, evaluate the effectiveness of improvements implemented since 2006, number 1. Number 2, evaluate the need for these 3 capacity projects and communicate with the water board about that. And then while we're at it, we're updating the model with all the things we've done with the capital projects. Let's identify any additional capacity issues we should prioritize for our capital improvement program. So those are really the 3 goals, and we learned a lot through this exercise. And it was really fortunate, you know, to work with West Yost, who had experience in doing this, getting it ramped up for the IAMP work, and fortunate that we could monitor the same locations, and we had good storm data from the winter of 2021, and we're monitoring the same locations in our system as back in 2006. So it's really a good study, a solid basis for drawing conclusions. I think that's all I wanted to say. And, you know, that this is tied to CDO compliance. It's tied to sewer system management plans for compliance with this statewide order that Paul mentioned. You know, we have to do this capacity evaluation as part of the SSMP. So we really do check a box on being compliant, in compliance with that order and its expectations, thanks to the good work done by West Yost. So I want to introduce Rodora Biagtan of West Yost, as well as Patrick Johnston, who's here, who's an expert modeler, and Josh Steiner, who did a lot of good work getting the memos together and working on the models as well. A lot of good work goes into this in monitoring modeling. I wanted to give them a chance to present the results and answer any questions the board or the public may have. I think with that, I'm going to hand it over to Rodora.
Thank you, Steve. We will be sharing a presentation. Patrick, can you share your screen, please? So good evening, President Gaffney and members of the board. Tonight, my colleagues and I will be presenting the results of the wastewater collection system capacity evaluation that we performed. As Steve said, my name is Rodora Biagtan, and I manage the preparation of the study. My co-presenters are Patrick Johnston, the project engineer, and Josh Steiner, our staff engineer, and they're the technical experts here. And so They'll get a chance to speak a little bit later. Next slide, please. So in this presentation, we will go over the purpose of the study, the results of past improvement projects, the evaluation criteria used, and the findings associated with the SHCAP projects and additional capacity issues. I wanted to share that this is a follow-up study that builds on several studies that have been conducted by the district between 2006 and 2021. The most prominent of these studies are the 2006 Sanitary Sewer Hydraulic Evaluation and Capacity Assurance Plan, and we call that SHCAP, which recommended a series of projects to reduce infiltration and inflow. The second prominent document is the 2021 Infrastructure Asset Management Plan Update, which found that infiltration and inflow reduction effectiveness must account for soil saturation periods to make sure that any year-over-year comparisons are meaningful. So in this project, we monitored flows when the soil is saturated, so we could understand the impacts of a prolonged wastewater infiltration and inflow. Next slide, please. Like Steve said, the purpose of this study is to evaluate the effectiveness of the improvements that the district have implemented since 2006. For the benefit of the audience, the 2006 SHCAP study provided a good number of improvements that the district have already implemented over time to reduce infiltration and inflow. There are 3 projects in the northern portion of the district service area which have not been implemented, and those are shown. And if Patrick can use his cursor to kind of show where those 3 projects are. They're in the northern region. And we also wanted to identify capacity issues that have that may come up. And the system has aged since 2006. There's a combination of improvements that the district have implemented, and we wanted to see what was happening in the system. The flow monitoring was conducted between December 13, 2021 and February 11, 2022. After the soils in the district service area were sufficiently saturated. The locations are substantially the same as the 2006 SHCAP project to make sure that we are comparing apples to apples. And we use the flow monitoring data to calibrate and update the sewer model. So I'm going to turn the presentation over to Patrick to discuss what we found.
So to update the model, we implemented or we incorporated the improvement projects that the district had made recently. And the other major upgrade to the model was the calibration of the model using the flow monitoring data that we gathered during the flow monitoring effort. So that helped us refine the model in terms of how much inflow and infiltration was predicted based on the flow monitoring data. And after that, we used the model to perform the analysis. What we found was that RDII, that's rainfall dependent infiltration, had decreased in 14 of the different catchment areas that we were monitoring with the flow monitoring effort. And then we also found that the majority, 65% of the improvements that the district had undertaken over the last 15 or so years were within the basins, which saw the decreases in RDII. And those improvements are all highlighted in yellow in the map on the left. Those are the improvement projects that the district has undertaken over the last 15 years. You can see that it is quite extensive. And then overall, the decrease in RDII from 2006 was about 28%. After we calibrated the model, we wanted to evaluate the system. And so we use these updated evaluation criteria to do that, to use the model. What we do is we incorporate a design storm, a 10-year, 24-hour design storm, and impart that on the system using the hydraulic model. And then we evaluate the model in terms of where the flows are and where the model would predict things like surcharging or potentially overflows. In the past, the SheCap project had a criteria that indicated that it would flag any surcharging that was within 10 feet of the groundwater of the ground surface. That was the one criteria that it used. We came up with a different system that was reflective of that, but also added some more details that allowed us to kind of grade the surcharging that was seen in the model and prioritize it. So the details of that are available to you, but what we did is we used the criteria to identify the priority 1 and priority 2 surcharging that the model predicted, and then come up with ways to address that.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. I would just put in here that this was really an improvement and a refinement of criteria. You know, as Patrick mentioned, it was sort of a blunt instrument in the 2006 order, which study, which didn't recognize that the nature of our system is surcharge isn't necessarily the enemy. CMSA likes the fact that we surcharge and throttle flow, so we don't hit CMSA all at once and cause them to have to bypass more flows. So there's this system is more nuanced, you know, to give you a fancy word, that allows us to prioritize certain areas where, you know, this surcharge is getting uncomfortably high based on predictions, you know, within a foot of the ground surface. What the model's telling us, that's to us that jumps out as okay, we look at that. Whereas these, if the surcharge is further down, that's not as a critical situation. So I hope that makes sense. That was part of the refinement of the criteria.
So the map on the previous page here shows where the priority 1 through 4 surcharging occurred in the system, so you can get an idea of where they were. And then the next step of the model evaluation was to look at the SheCap projects 1, 2, and 5 and evaluate whether or not those were still needed according to the new criteria system. And what we found was that neither projects 1 nor projects 5 qualified as priority 1 or 2 surcharging events under a 10-year design storm. However, SheCap project 2 does qualify as a priority 1 surcharging event. So we provided a recommendation in our work as to whether or not to implement that, and we said that it should be implemented as originally suggested. This is SheCap project 2.
Where exactly is that? I was having trouble finding it.
Yes, so I can point this out. You know, Patrick can use the cursor, but the current sewer goes down Park toward Bolinas Road. There, yeah, that's currently the trunk, and it goes right by the town of Fairfax Town Hall. And so the conceptual project is to do a parallel relief sewer that would send, you know, part of the flow in a different direction along an 18-inch line, and then we have to go under Fairfax Creek in a dual siphon, and then continue on into this 18-inch diameter, go under the hill here. It would require tunneling to maintain grade and line and grade, and then it would go down the Broadway Street and end at Pacheco. So that's a downtown area there. So this is still a conceptual project, and we were just in contact with the town of Fairfax representatives communicating this as coming out of this capacity evaluation. We certainly will evaluate alternative alignments before we settle in on this as the place it must go. But I think some thought went into things like utility conflicts, Park Road is a narrow street and there are probably a lot of utilities. There's a storm drain there. So, we don't want to get folks' hopes up too high that we can, do a double barrel down Park. I think we may have to do something like this, but we're getting the public conversation going and tonight, and I wanted to highlight this for the board that this is a challenging type project. As I said in my staff report, it doesn't have to happen immediately. We're telling the water board, we're going to commit to doing this relief sewer, but we're going to, it could be as soon as 2025, but it might be as late as 2027.
So that was our evaluation of the 3 SheCap projects, and we continued the evaluation of the system to look at other areas of the system that might qualify as priority 1 or 2 surcharging. And we came up with 8 different areas that did qualify as priority 1 or 2 surcharging. And then we provided recommendations that Ross Valley continue to monitor these and as you proceed in the future. And we also came up with mitigation alternatives, which are different ways that these capacity issues could be dealt with as the district moves forward. And that is the end of our first presentation.
Yeah, and Patrick, maybe you could go back to that previous slide. Yeah. And so as I just wanted to highlight to the board members and interested public that under these mitigation alternatives, it shows there's a range of ways we can address the capacity issues. These are just different options, and it is the way we go about looking at it. We do a lot of this third bullet, upstream pipe rehabilitation. If we can reduce the I&I and branch sewers upstream of these red pipes that were on that map, then future monitoring would probably show those red colors going away and turning into yellow and green, and even less, right? So we're seeing some indications, even recent work is showing those kind of results. So that's often an option where we don't have to do the upsize. And then in the case of the Fairfax project we described, the parallel relief sewer, I would say it might be the most expensive. Sewer upsizing, the next most expensive, then rehabilitation, and then on down this list as far as expense and complexity, and then we can continue to monitor the flows and through our smart cover system. That's really helpful, and Paul can attest to that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
We watch those and we put the smart covers in these capacity areas. We're already doing that. To keep an eye on things during these events like we had in January. So good. So I just wanted to clarify that, we have a menu of ways to continue to manage this. It doesn't just mean we're going to go in there and upsize the big trunk lines, because as the board knows, we've worked on these areas a bit in the last 10 years. We don't need to go in and necessarily increase brand new plastic pipes. Okay. So yeah, let's have some question and answer.
Any questions by board members? Pam, looks like you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you for that. Question, I just want to make sure I heard you right. Did you say that there's communication with the Fairfax community about this starting? Did I hear you wrong or right?
Not the community, the representatives of the town. So we met with the town manager and the Department of Public Works director.
Lauren, yeah, okay.
Yeah, who is here, I think. Yeah, he's here.
Yeah. Just thinking of Park, it's a 1 lane. People have to pull over to pass. There's no 2 lane there at all. And there is a very active children's park there. I mean, it's like the worst place you could find. I'm sorry. But I just know that street is scary every time you go down there and people walk right across the street. I don't know. If there's any alternatives, it would be nice to hear them. So, but I think though, because of that, it would be a major disruption for that whole community down there. That's all I'll say for now.
Okay, thanks. Any other board members have comments?
I'm just wondering how much Steve thinks that relief sewer will cost. Any clue?
Oh, yeah. We haven't, it'd be hard for me to just pull that out of my hat here, but I think I'm budgeting about 7 million.
Yeah, that's what I was.
But it could be more,
Yeah. Okay, I got it. Yeah, I know. We need to.
we're going to be looking at, we're going to have a budget number for it. I think I have about 7 million right now, and we're going to look at that each year about this time. We go through the capital improvement program, and this year we'll put a project sheet together for this project, so we'll have a more refined rough estimate.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah.
Any other board members? Any members of the public wish to ask questions or comments?
Hi, this is Lauren Umbertus from Town of Fairfax.
Oh, welcome.
Well, thank you very much. I wanted to just say that I did have the opportunity to speak with Steve today about that project, and to echo those concerns. Yes, Park is a very busy road. So is Broadway. So is that section of town as well. So, we understand that there will be a lot of disruption. We do also recognize that Park has storm drainage issues down there. So we, as part of our discussion that we had informally, we agreed to work together and try to address multiple issues that exist on both of those areas, depending upon how your progress goes. And we certainly need to do some work on our end that is separate from the districts. But it was a really great call today, and I just want to express my thanks to the Ross Valley Sanitary District for reaching out to us and letting us know those plans so that we can start getting that into our head and start communicating that with our community.
Well, thank you. That's good to hear.
I'd like to add one more thing. Because that is such a concentrated, poor traffic flow, and I worked on the general plan for 10 years in that town, in a disaster, if it was blocked because of, this kind of goes, it's like a domino effect because I've lived there so long, and people that one area is where it absolutely will gridlock for a fire. We just had a truck that blocked the bottom of my hill. He jackknifed or something. Nobody could get out of here. So if there was a heart attack or whatever, nobody could get out. So I just want to tell you that just to let you know ahead of time. Thank you.
Hey, Lauren, what do you do for Fairfax?
I'm the Director of Public Works for the Town of Fairfax.
Great. Yes. So it's really good to have you work closely with our departments to make sure that, we're letting people know about road projects and get their laterals done when you're doing road projects anywhere in Fairfax. Obviously that increases our lateral replacement, and we're interested in giving out grants and having digging for lateral replacement moratoriums when you got to do new roads. So we want to hit the homeowners up prior to that.
Yeah, and that's I appreciate that, and thank you for the comments. That is how I originally reached out to Steve. I've known Steve from my previous position in Sausalito, and so we were able to easily create this communication. But the initial reason for reaching out to Steve, or Steve reaching out to me, I don't remember who reached out to who first, but we are in the middle of our street improvement program, and I've identified a few streets already that I want to do in this fiscal year. And we're going to be in the process of trying to put together our 5-year plan. So, my initial goal was to reach out to Ross Valley, reach out to MMWD, PG&E, and start, working together to lay out where we want to do our work, find out where you're going to do your work, coordinate that. I think that that's been a little lacking in the town of Fairfax in the last few years, not through bad reasons, but just I don't know that there were enough resources there to do that. But that is the goal that I have, is to start putting together a plan and working with all of you and all the different agencies to figure out how to make that happen, so we don't have to do a road and then tear it up, 3 months later.
Yeah, I'm delighted to hear that, Lauren. I'm glad you're here.
We all, and your public will be happy to hear that too.
Can we stop sharing the screen, Tom?
Four.
Can we stop sharing the screen? There we go. Thank you.
Lauren, it's Pam again. I would advise, and I don't know if this can happen, to put together a small advisory committee. And it could be one of us, and it could be a couple from the community, whoever it is, because I just know those parents where that park is, it's just, I just giving you a heads up. But I think if you had a small advisory committee to work on what the people want, and it would definitely help integrate and make things hopefully end on a happier note. Thank you.
Sure, that advice well taken, and yeah, you're right. It's a busy area. It's in a flood zone. There's lots of other issues that are going on there. Absolutely, I don't think that this is something that will happen without a lot of public involvement.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. Any other comments from board members or the public? Okay, well, that was a great presentation, and I'm glad we don't have to do all of those projects, but this one's a pretty big one. Okay, should we move on to 8C now? Okay.
Yes, thank you, President Gaffney. And for this item, you might recall when the board approved the contract with West Yost to update the capacity evaluation, there was also some stakeholders from our neighboring Woodacre area had contacted us and asked if it was feasible and what it would cost to connect to our system. And I looked around, and we really haven't studied that type of expansion of the system up toward northwest corner and Fairfax before. And so we're updating the capacity evaluation, and I saw an opportunity to answer those questions. And so we put a small addition to the study for West Yost with the updated model to extend the model up to the northwest corner of our district in the Baywood Canyon area off of Sir Francis Drake, and model a hypothetical connection to see what additional changes from a capacity standpoint would be necessary in our system under design storm conditions, and with design storm assumptions coming out of San Geronimo Valley, and to answer those questions of what it would take to make improvements to the RVSD system only, no estimates to the specifics, except some assumptions on how you connect to San Geronimo Valley, really focusing on if that were to happen, what would those who would benefit in the San Geronimo Valley need to pay for, and what kind of, what would be the scope of the improvements needed. So it was an iterative process, as I described in the staff report, where the modeling team kind of iteratively looked at what the flows were and what diameter pipelines could convey those flows, and it resulted in, I think, a pretty easy to follow technical memorandum that laid out specific capacity areas that should look kind of familiar because there's some overlap to the capacity issues that were in the main memo that was the main purpose of this exercise. So that's my introduction, and then we tried to give you some specificity on the type of projects that we would have to build, and the length and of the pipelines, and a rough cost estimate that Phil Benedetti, our senior engineer, put together based on similar bid tabs, we call them, bid tables that we're receiving in Marin County. So they represent cost per foot that's reasonable based on what we're seeing at this time. So, that work West Yost didn't do. We did the cost estimate that's in here. It's about $45 million and about 4.6 miles on this table on board packet 104. Indicates a very substantial amount of change to our system that would be necessary to accommodate this connection. And just looking at it from those perspectives. And I won't go into more detail than that right now. You may have some questions about the level of disruption or how difficult this work would be, which I can answer later. But I want to hand it off to the West Yost team to describe, they have a PowerPoint for this. It's very brief, just to describe this technical memorandum and some of the assumptions. And then they can answer questions as well. So let me hand it off. I'm not sure which of you is going to take it.
I'll do that.
Okay, Patrick.
So let me share my screen again. So the green polygons up on the map here represent the San Geronimo Valley area that we looked at. Using some land use information that we were provided for this area, we came up with an estimated flow of 1.27 million gallons per day. We did that by looking at wastewater generation factors that we saw in other districts nearby. And we looked at those and conferred with Steve and other district staff and then did some work to reduce those. We compared those wastewater generation factors with what we are seeing within the Ross Valley service area. And that's what caused us to reduce them by almost 50%, which is indicated in the technical memorandum. So we wanted to introduce those flows into the system using the hydraulic model. And to do that, we had to kind of come up with a system for doing that. And that included a pump station, which we are showing here, a shorter section of force main, and then a gravity main that brought the flows from the San Geronimo Valley to the connection point where they would enter the Ross Valley system. That's here. As Steve indicated, we didn't do any work to estimate a sewer system up in the San Geronimo Valley itself, but only put in enough facilities to get that flow into the Ross Valley system. And I recognize that there are other routes for getting that flow into the Ross Valley system as well. There are other avenues for doing that, including, I think, a tunnel up in this area. But the main purpose of the study was to see what the effects would be on the Ross Valley system, not necessarily to solve the problem of getting the flow to the Ross Valley system. So then we used the hydraulic model to analyze what the effects would be on the Ross Valley system, and came up with 3 areas in this upstream part of the system. What we found when we introduced the flows into the model was that the system up in this upper area was really not big enough at all to handle the flows, and there were a lot of restrictions in the flow that dampened the peak flows that were experienced in the system, to the point where we really had to deal with these issues upstream first before we could even see what the effects would be downstream. So we came up with 3 major projects here. The connection point, as you can see, is up north of where we were talking about before with SheCap Project 2. And then we had to extend or upsize pipelines all along this red line. We call that San Geronimo Project 1. And it overlaps actually partially with SheCap Project 1, which is highlighted here in yellow. And what we found was that SheCap Project 1, the diameter of that proposed project wasn't enough to accommodate the flows. So the diameter in SheCap Project 1 had to be increased. And the extents of it would also have to be quite a bit larger, as you can see that it extends farther up to the north. The second project in orange is a completely new project that is basically a connection point between SheCap Project 1 and Project 2. This is a stretch of pipeline that would have to be upsized. And then the last one is SheCap Project 2, which we discussed earlier in capacity analysis. This project would actually have to be increased even beyond what is currently proposed as SheCap Project 2. So we found that as proposed, SheCap Project 2 would not be sufficient to accommodate the flows. So the diameter would have to be increased. So after looking at the upstream areas, then we could, those are the projects here shown in orange that I was just describing. After we resolve the capacity issues upstream, then the true effects of this increased flow could be seen on the downstream portion of the system as well. So we looked at that area and came up with 4 projects that we would have to be implemented in the downstream area. The first 3 of those, the first 3 major bullets, are correspond with, at least partially, with the capacity issues. If you remember, I had mentioned 8 capacity issues that were identified in the capacity study. These first 3 projects correspond with 3 of those. So as proposed or as identified in our last capacity analysis, they would have to be even larger to accommodate the flows from San Geronimo. And then we identified a 4th project at the bottom, which was not one of the capacity issues we identified in our capacity analysis, but this is a new one that would be needed in order to accommodate the flows from the San Geronimo Valley. So as you can see, the projects are quite extensive and fairly large diameter on this slide. So they would be fairly serious projects. So that brings us to the questions session. I'll move it back to this slide so we can have something to ask about.
Actually, can you close that? Can you stop sharing your screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Tom? I have some questions.
Okay, Doug?
Thank you. Patrick, can I ask you where your numbers came from? Do you know the number of people who live in the valley?
I do not, no.
And on page board packet 102, system characteristics, you estimate a 1.27 million gallons per day with a peak 5-year and 10-year of wet weather flow of 8.83 and 9.42. But this would all be brand new piping from, there's no pipes in the valley. There's no laterals, there's no sewers. So I don't see how we'd have inflow I&I of almost 7 times in the winter on 1.27. That I don't think that makes sense to me. Am I wrong?
Well, it may not happen right now, as the system is currently. I mean, if as a brand new system, you wouldn't have that, but
right.
Sewer system do deteriorate.
Julia, can you share that spreadsheet? Okay. I spoke to Dennis Rodoni, the elections department, and MMWD. And what I have is currently the last column, winter average month, they have 7,528 CCF, which is 100 cubic feet. 100 cubic feet is 748.05 gallons. So on an average month, they're using 5,631,445 gallons, a daily use of 181,660. Dennis Rodoni estimates the population there to be 3,500. And he says he knows that because he got 3,800 votes there. This is a man who does not leave things to chance. But I got and that's a joke. I got an estimate, not an estimate, the number of adults registered to vote in the Lagunitas school district is 2,842. I used Dennis's number of 3,500. And that's a pretty low average usage, but you'll notice there's some zeros there. I think that there's a number of vacation properties that are used in the summer, but not so much in the winter. So you might want to see that's where it is. So with that in mind, your first study is fantastic. I think this study well overestimates the number of gallons that we'd be getting from the San Geronimo Valley, and therefore well overestimates the need for us to make improvements in ours. Do you disagree with what I'm showing you here?
Having just looked at it on the surface, it looks fine to me, and it looks like a reasonable set of numbers. I would have to study it more
Okay.
to give you an opinion.
Steve has that. I'd like if Steve can get that to you, Patrick, because I think it, your firm's done a great job, but I'm just there's not that many people out there, and so I don't think that we have that much water. I don't see we'd ever get 1.27 coming out when we're only putting in 181 in the first place. So and I did a winter rather than summer because in the summertime people are watering their lawns and there's a lot of horse and cattle out there, and so that water is going into the cattle and going back into the ground. It's not going into pipes. Okay, those are the questions I wanted to ask, and so I'd just like to maybe you and Steve can get together and take a fresh look at this at some point. And Julia, I don't need you. You can close that screen if you like.
Well, was that just like 8 or 9 homes?
No, that was 1,532 service area addresses. 1,532.
Okay.
And then I got that from Ben Horenstein, who I had a long chat with. And I had a chat with Dennis Rodoni, and again, the elections department.
Oh, what do we say? Steve, do you have any comments on that? I mean, I know you have to be conservative when you're putting a pipe in. If you build it too small,
then you're going to regret it.
Then you got to go back and do it. I think it's kind of important for us to say right now, we're not looking to sewer this area. We just wanted to, if people want to get sewered, here's the impact on our district.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and that's what we are. If people are talking about maybe annexing to us, we owe it to ourselves to know what happens to our pipes.
I couldn't agree more. I would say one thing, Tom, though. I believe, and Ben agreed with me, I think in general, with the infrastructure bills that have been passed in the Congress, both the state and the federal government are anxious to get rid of
septic systems.
Yeah, they're really anxious. So I think there's a good opportunity for grants, and I'm sure that Dennis Rodoni would be able to work on that along with maybe Jared.
Okay.
Well, we'd be happy to look at it again. One of the things, as you mentioned, that there were some zeros in your spreadsheet there, people.
Yeah. And you feel free to call. Ben was very helpful. I put a call into him Monday. He called me back Monday. He got me the data Tuesday. So I haven't had that much time to work on this as well. But he's available to talk to you anytime, I'm sure.
Sure. We did assume that all the parcels in the valley were occupied and contributing flow to the system. And
as they probably are in the summertime.
Or potentially to be occupied. I was wondering, what did the $46 million estimate include us sharing some of the upgrade because we need it anyway, or that was just the total cost of the upgrades?
Yeah, it's I had some disclaimer language in the staff report that we haven't really figured out an allocation completely. But in the technical memo, I think they did a nice job of explaining certain areas were new. They mentioned that one upstream area, the uppermost part of the downstream area, is basically downtown San Anselmo. That isn't triggered by our capacity evaluation, but entirely by addition of San Geronimo. So we didn't go into that level of granular detail. There might be portions of these projects that would benefit the Ross Valley residents, but really it's the need for upsizing is really triggered by San Geronimo annexation. As I point out in that list of bullets, upsizing is but one alternative. We can handle capacity issues as it is, independent of a new connection. And in these big major trunk lines along Corte Madera Creek, over there by Stadium Way, the mega line. Yeah. One of the board members heard me there. And then the pump station going from 41 MGD to 50 MGD. That's, that wouldn't get triggered really necessarily just independent of a new connection to San Geronimo. So it's a nuanced discussion, but I would say the majority of the 46 million would have to be borne by San Geronimo Valley residents.
And, sewering an area isn't going to be, the laterals and the sewer mains. That's probably going to be more than upsizing our sewers. It's an expensive proposal.
Yeah, that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
And I do point out in my staff report that one value of this estimate, which is not far off, it's rough, but it's the right ballpark. It'll give the local residents, a data point to say, well, if we were to have to go use CMSA to treat our waste, this is what it would cost on top of sewering the valley. And then, you can then compare that to other alternatives that the valley residents may have, which is liable to be a hybrid, right? That's usually the way these things work, is that some areas can continue to be septic systems and some areas get together and decide they want to treat and reuse the water, right? But that's all their discussion. It has nothing to do with Ross Valley Sanitary District.
Right. Okay. Any other comments by board members? Pam, you have your hand raised?
Yeah. I just wanted to point out something written in the report, and then I have other couple of comments and questions. But on the last page of the board packet 105, it says up in the first paragraph, it talks about, am I in the right? Let me make sure I'm in the right section. It says this project is planned to be constructed in the next 2 to 3 years, and project pipe sizing should be determined in advance of putting this project out to bid to be more cost effective and less disruptive to the community in the long run. Is this a done deal?
No.
Okay.
So let's put that sentence in the context of the paragraph.
Okay.
The second sentence says the SheCap project number 2 in downtown Fairfax has been confirmed by the capacity evaluation as needed to increase capacity to our system. And it is not included in table 1 in the list of projects there. So, and then the description of the project. And so this project is planned to be constructed in the next 2 to 3 years. And
Okay.
so the issue, the theme of this paragraph is if the valley and its residents and its decision makers want to connect to RVSD, they should tell us. And so that we can plan our projects accordingly, because we are planning this project, SheCap number 2, downtown Fairfax. And so we just wanted to communicate that out of all that's going on in our system, this is the one thing that would be impacted by a decision from the San Geronimo Valley, and there isn't much time for them to decide.
I get it. Okay. I get it. That's very helpful.
To impact this. Yeah. So thanks for the question, because it's complicated, but I thought it was worth communicating that we can go back on our system and deal with some of those other issues if it came to that, if this was really thought to be the best alternative. But this other project is in the works.
Okay. Okay. Then I also had a question about, let's just say, possibly everything's wonderful and perfect, and the system went in. Would the rates be like Larkspur? Would they have different rates than the rest of the Ross Valley, or is that too premature?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, Director Gaffney might have some thoughts on that.
Do. They probably would have to fund their system, and then they would have to pay our operating costs and then ongoing repairs. So, yeah. I mean, they're going to have to, Doug was mentioning grants, but even with grants, there's going to be a local share however they figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
Probably an assessment bond or some kind, but, you know, I mean,
And then,
I don't see our ratepayers paying for
yeah,
sewering that area.
okay.
If that's what you're
Thank
asking.
you. Thank you, Tom. That was perfect. And then, let's see. Yeah, because there's a whole different, from what I know, various people I know out in the valley, all different places, all different areas out there, there's different politics. And, you know, that needs to be really ironed out as well. And that could be.
Not by us.
What?
Not by us.
No, not by us. That's right. And then, so then my last thing is looking at the word annexation here. I was on LAFCO off and on while I was on the board here. Now, annexations from LAFCO do include sewer, but I think they're in different circumstances, like a sewer is going out or something of that nature. Do you know if LAFCO would be involved in this?
Yes, I do. And I see Felicia smiling.
It was a bad question, was it?
No, she absolutely, yes. In order to provide sewer service to San Geronimo Valley, we would have to annex that area.
So an MSR has to be done.
Yeah.
And that takes a while too. It could be a year. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think the community really needs to know all this stuff. You're right, though. We're only going to give so much information, and then it's really back to the San Geronimo Valley. And then last, where's my other questions? Refund. I'm playing. I think that's it. Yeah, the LAFCO thing is pretty important. A lot of people don't even know what LAFCO is or that it exists until something like this shows up. And I think that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other comments from board members or the public?
Yes. This is Mike Glennon. I guess we got, is there an echo on your end?
Your name again?
Mike McLennan. So I just
getting back feeds from you. I think
let's see.
You need to turn off one speaker.
You know.
Let's see.
Yep.
Okay. How's this? No, it's not. Just one moment.
You should call in.
There we go.
Your name again?
So, a couple of things I wanted the board to
Your
be aware
name
of
again,
that
sir?
Some people already do know, is that there was a 2017 Questa engineering study that was completed on that date, initiated by Steve Kinsey, Supervisor Rodoni's predecessor. And that study proposed a small treatment plant at the old golf course that only serves Woodacre and San Geronimo. Those are the areas that are most concerned as far as septic overflows or contamination of the creek. So the idea of large volumes serving all the residences out in that valley would be very difficult and involve huge expenses. There's even the truncated proposal put a number of $19,000 a parcel on the cost of sewering specific areas. So it was interesting to hear that somebody had contacted Dennis Rodoni. Both Dennis Rodoni and other folks from the valley have been absolutely opposed to any kind of sewer system out there because they were fear that it will open up development. So the question I had three questions. First of all, the first thing was already answered, that this $47 million is only for your system. But what kind of coordination has already been done, or has it just been a contact with Supervisor Rodoni? Second would be, who initiated your study? Was it initiated through the county encouragement, or did you guys take it on yourself? And then the last one was whether the pump station that was in your plan to do the lift over Red Hill, whether that was part of the $47 million, or is that something that's on the Valley residents? So those are my questions. I just I bring them up. The request to engineering report is kind of key, and that's basically been quashed by the current supervisor out there.
I'll take the Rodoni question, Tom.
Okay.
I spoke, Mike, I spoke to Dennis, but only briefly and only in relation to the number of people out in his district, out there in the Valley. But I did advise him of this topic on tonight's agenda, and he may watch it later. I hope he does, but I didn't really talk to him about sewering the Valley. I just talked to him about the population and that this was an agenda item.
And Mike, that was one board member talking to Mr. Rigoni, not not the board or not the district in person. One board member that did his own research. That's nice. The second question, Steve, you could answer. Why did we do this study?
Yes, in my introductory remarks, I tried to touch on that we had been contacted by a group there that had been working on the wastewater plant you're talking about. And they were running out of options at the time, and they because that project had been taken off the books, and they contacted us to ask, A, is it feasible to connect? B, do you have capacity? C, what would it cost? And those are difficult questions to answer. But we were doing this capacity evaluation, and the capacity evaluation with not very much more effort can begin to answer those questions. So that's the origin of that, of the reason. And then you asked about costs, and yeah, we were trying to be really clear here that the cost estimates and projects described are all in the Ross Valley system. So the pump station you mentioned, that would be a fire road or in that railroad tunnel or whatever, that's not included in the cost estimate. So getting to the Ross Valley system is entirely excluded from the cost estimate. And that's all, that would be a different cost estimating exercise.
And the only reason we did the study is because we modeled our system, and all we had to do was add a flow at some point. It was very simple to do. I believe if we weren't modeling our system, we probably wouldn't have done the review. It would have been expensive, but it was very simple for us to add a data point is all it was. It wasn't because we are anxious to serve anybody. The board hasn't discussed that. I don't know. I'm ambivalent, Any other questions?
Did I answer all the questions?
Unfortunately, I had an echo problem and turned my speaker off, and I missed most of that. But I assume this is being recorded, so I can go back and listen to it.
Sure. Good. Okay. Hey, Mike, I didn't get your name.
Mike McClellan.
Mike McClellan.
McLennan. It's McLennan, and I live in Terralinda. I've been kind of an advocate of the Las Colinas Sanitary District purple pipe system, and a lot of the measures have been taken to recycle water.
Great.
It's a great system.
Okay, any other comments by board or public?
I had one question for Steve. And I forget, it's been a while. On annexation, it's a board and they vote and all that. But if they vote to annex, the only thing that can stop that is a protest vote from the community. And it's kind of like a 218 vote. Am I right?
Yeah, that's a little outside of my knowledge.
Okay, that's okay.
Well,
There's
if
a
they,
couple of people on that board I know well. I'll ask them. Thank you.
what board is that, Pamela? What?
LAFCO.
Oh, LAFCO.
Yeah,
If they vote to annex,
that's it.
they've already voted to annex. I don't know what, we don't know that they're going to do that. And
Right.
I don't know who
Right.
the they is because they're not a board, you know, that is how to work it out. Remember how difficult it was even to annex Murray Park? You know, it took a while, you know. And
Right.
so, and that's a formed district. It was a sewer maintenance district served by the board. Now, this is an area that, for these purposes, does not have a district or a board or a boundary. So it's orders of magnitude more difficult, I think.
Okay, thanks.
I think, Board Member Kelly had some questions about assumptions on design. I think, I appreciate and respect the line of questioning that Director Kelly went. It was a little bit more of a kind of a ground up estimate of wastewater flow. But there really is an industry standard approach. It takes into account, as the consultants mentioned, aging of the system, that you have to be able to convey, not just the low flows, but the high flows. When development does occur, we base things on things like drainage fixture units and what the flows are from toilets and sinks and showers, and we have a multiplier. So there's some standard design parameters that take into account the fluctuations. So using actual data for design is not the industry standard. Rodora or Patrick or Josh, do you have anything to add to that? Just to create some clarity on how we go about coming up with that 1.27 million gallons per day design flow.
Well, as I alluded to before, we did assume that flow would be contributed to the system by all of the parcels, not just the ones that are occupied in the winter months now. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but to be conservative, yeah, that would be a valid assumption. And also the water use that is experienced there now might be different in the future. So these assumptions, yeah, that you could be right. I'm not sure, but in order to be conservative to some degree, we want to assume that we make assumptions to make sure that when we do our analysis, we do end up with a system that will be able to convey the flows. Will be very likely to be able to convey the flows. So we make assumptions about inflow and infiltration, as you pointed out. We wouldn't expect there to be much of anything at the very beginning, but systems age and things change over time. So what we do is use these industry standards, as Steve said, to make assumptions about what the system will look like at some point in the future.
And I wanted to share that we looked at similar communities and looked at their sewer flows. Those communities are older, and so yeah, they do have those base inflow and filtration, and we use that as a basis, but we made adjustments to that, looking at the Ross Valley Sanitary District's system and the flows, and so we tried to simulate the flows from that area so that it would be similar to what's happening within the district itself. And if you look at the service area size, we compared that to the Ross Valley Sanitary District's service area size, and it looked reasonable from that point of view.
Yeah, Rodora had a lot of her career. Was it Dublin, San Ramon?
Dublin, San Ramon Services District. And in that area, there was an area that it grew in a 20-year period. It tripled in size, and it was amazing. So
Right, so a lot of experience with new sewer systems, right, Rodora?
Yeah, yeah, and over time, I was there for over 20 years, and even those new sewer systems did start deteriorating. It's just the nature of things, especially in areas where it's hills and you have creeks nearby, and you just have varying terrain. So
Yep, and then neighbors, they just kind of quietly connect those roof drains to the sewer system.
yeah. So
Gotcha.
those things happen. Thank you.
So thanks. I thought we should, allow a little discussion on those assumptions because, to Director Kelly's credit, it was an interesting way to kind of cross-check assumptions, based on actual information. That's legitimate, but there's a lot of factors that go into the industry standards for design.
Yeah, and I wanted to share also that these are planning level estimates. So, we take that with a grain of salt. It could vary significantly, depending on what the standards are in place when construction actually happens, right? The other thing is, oh my gosh, I lost my train of thought there. I'm sorry. It is these are planning estimates and they could vary, but what the analysis shows is the issues that we saw in the capacity evaluation are further exacerbated by these additional flows, and that's what we saw. And we are in the range to the order of magnitude of the upsizing that would be needed to accommodate flows from that community. Even if those flows are a little bit lower, those are just pipes that will be impacted by the flows from the San Geronimo Valley.
Yeah, great point. And, that means, okay, so maybe it's not a 27-inch sewer, but it still needs to be, 24-inch or whatever, 18-inch.
Yeah.
It's still a project, you still got to get in there and make the changes. So thank you. Appreciate those answers, Rodora. Very good.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Well,
Yes, with if you'll put up with one more question, Doug had made an encouraging remark about the infrastructure money coming down the road. Is that something that is in the works, imminent, or do you know? Okay, so that basically it's a possibility, not a probability. And I know that the 1970 Clean Water Act, under the I think it was under the another administration, that really triggered a lot of the abatement of sewage problems in rural areas, and it also upgraded in the urban areas too. So those are a couple of things that just wanted to leave everybody with, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
welcome. Okay, any further comments? We put this one to bed. Okay, thank you very much. That finishes our agenda. Our next meeting will be on March 15th at 5 o'clock. So meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
all.
Thank you, board members and visiting public. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Tom.
And all the consultants, thanks for your hard work.
All right. Good night.
All right.
Good night.